Serious. What's the scariest experience you have been through? Not safe for work, Part 2. Viewer discretion is advised. Please do like, share, and subscribe. When I was 11, I was with a group of my pals a few streets away from home. A truck drew up and a man coaxed my friend to get in the cab, saying he'd buy her an ice cream. We tried to tell her no, but she was a messed up kid. They drove off to get ice cream, and we anxiously waited for her to come back, which she did about 20 minutes later, minus ice cream. I went home and told my parents, who told her parents. They brought me to the police station, and I had to give a description of him, which was circulated by local newspapers. He was never seen in the area again, but 4 years later on a Sunday morning, his face was on every newspaper and TV channel in the UK. It was Fred West, the serial killer. To this day, I don't believe he would have brought her back if we hadn't made such a fuss about her getting into a vehicle with a stranger. I was about 14 years old, and the classic want to see my dad's gun scenario came up at a friend's house. I, having never been around guns before, grabbed it out of my friend's hand and jokingly pointed it at another friend pulling the trigger. Luckily, we weren't smart enough to know how to get it out of the holster. Not very scary at the time, but so stupid in retrospect. Please store your weapons out of your children's reach and teach your children to respect firearms. I almost watched my mom die. She was an alcoholic and had drank too much one day and I guess swallowed a bunch of Xanax. I still don't know if this was on purpose or not. I was like 10 at the time. I vividly remember my dad finding her mostly passed out and trying to slap her awake at the kitchen table. She was dying. The minutes we waited for the ambulance felt like hours. I believed she had her stomach pumped. We lived in an upper middle class area and looked like a totally normal family. No one ever knew this happened. For what it's worth, she's been sober for years now, and this is the happy and healthy nanny grandma to my 2 kids. I was surfing about 5 years ago in New Jersey, pre-hurricane swell. The waves were probably 6 to 7 feet overhead, which is pretty big for me. I'd been surfing a lot of my life at this point, so I was pretty used to going alone. I slipped up and got pummeled by a wave. When I came up for air, my leash that holds the board to my ankle had snapped. I was now in the break zone of 6 to 7 foot overhead waves with no board. I got absolutely crushed for a solid 5 to 10 minutes straight alone in the ocean. I felt like I was going to die. Eventually I got super lucky and just slammed on the shore. Didn't surf for about 5 years until recently, and I'm actually walking out the door to go now before work. Good luck. My mother tried to kill me. I was 17 and am currently no contact with her. I was kicked out at 14 and we have had a really unstable relationship since I was about 10. We were arguing over food and she was already mad about her boyfriend going on holiday with his friend. She took my phone from my hands and put it in her room upstairs. I asked her for my phone back multiple times as I had bought it myself and paid for everything to do with it. She kept refusing and told her boyfriend to not give me my phone back. I sat at the top of the stairs and said, "I'm not moving till I get my phone back." She shoved me backwards and put her forearm on my throat with her whole weight behind it. My mother is not a light woman, weighing in around 300 pounds at 5'2". I can still remember her whispering in my ear that she could kill me and get away with it. My vision started going black at the edges and I genuinely thought I was going to die. Pushing her off did not work and I was starting to lose consciousness, so I tried to punch her. It was a feeble slap against her side, but it was enough. She threw me down the stairs and said I was attacking her. She grabbed my throat with her nails and shoved me towards the living room. The next 2 hours were filled with her telling me how much she hated me and wished she had gotten an abortion. I was punched multiple times and told that I'd never be believed, that her boyfriend and his best mate would vouch for her and say I attacked her and she acted in self-defense. I cried myself to sleep and I'm shaking as I write this now. Choking someone is the most unforgivable of domestic violence and is a direct precursor to murder. Watching the EMTs take my dad away as he was having a stroke during peak COVID in December. I was in shock and was so terrified that would be the last time I ever saw him. I didn't even say goodbye. He made it, even though he had a massive stroke 2 days later, but we weren't able to see him for almost 3 weeks. And then barely saw him until late February. But that moment standing at our front door, watching them take him away, was the scariest moment of my entire life. I just knew that even if he lived, big if, Our lives would have a before and after, and was terrified for what the after would look like, whether he lived or died. Turns out it sucks more than I knew it would at the time. I left a laundry basket on the space heater at my apartment because it was a warm day and we weren't using it. We had the windows open and went outside, but it was late spring and the temperature dropped sharply and the space heater came on. The basket melted and dripped into the space heater and set the towels on fire. We drove into the drive and saw fire trucks there. The fireman asked if we lived in the apartment. My heart felt like it got squeezed in an iron fist. Things started to go black around the edges of my vision and grew until all I saw was a pinprick of light. I almost fainted. Fortunately, someone had heard our fire alarm and called 911. They got it just before the walls ignited. My cat was okay too. She literally jumped into my arms when I called her. I used to trail run by myself a lot, not on super remote trails, but it also wouldn't be uncommon for me to not see another person while I was out there. The last time that I went, I came around the corner and there was a guy eating blackberries from a patch along the trail. I ran past and gave a quick runner wave. As I was entering the woods a little further up the trail, I glanced behind me and he was walking behind me. Not directly behind me, but much closer than I felt like he should have been, considering that he seemed pretty distracted by the berries not long before. I was especially freaked out because I was already tired and facing an uphill climb while he had been relaxing, and I knew he'd be able to overtake me. I sprinted into the woods, grabbed the sharpest rock that I could find, and cut through the forest parallel to the trail before I took a turn until I could get back on it and run back the direction that I'd come from. He was probably some random guy who thought I was crazy, but I had some very bad vibes that day. I was born in Aleppo, Syria, and at some point the rebels took over half of the city, so I lived in the other half and my uni was in other. Under the rebels were multiple militant groups with different ideologies. Some of them were a bit left like freedom fighters, and some of them were far radical right like ISIS. They hated each other, but at the time didn't really fight. Anyways, I was going to the university, and ISIS members have taken over a checkpoint from the rebels, and they were controlling passengers. My dumbass had a Slipknot t-shirt with their weird-looking star. They stopped the vehicle I was in and asked for IDs. When one of them saw my t-shirt, he freaked out. I knew exactly what's going on, and I slipped my phone under the chair, and then he called me in the first night I was there with multiple people, and then a car came and took me alone to another city where they had their base. They didn't hit me, but they made it clear that I was done. There's no coming back because I was a Satan worshiper. I told them that I got the shirt from a place where they sell used clothes for cheap, and I have no idea what the shirt says or what it is. I told them I'm just a poor student who was trying to get by. They didn't believe me, and I spent another day. A day later, I was brought to some sort of a judge, and he looked into my case and asked me about Islam stuff, like how do you pray in the morning, and when do you say after praying, and if I had memorized parts of the Quran. Luckily, I spent 2 summers in an Islamic summer school as a kid, and I knew most of the stuff he asked me about. They asked about a phone. I told them I don't have one, I can't afford it. They gave me a new shirt and a sandwich and sent me back where they picked me up. Had they have seen my phone, I'm 100% positive I wouldn't be here writing this. I was robbed at gunpoint by 3 guys. After they took all my money, one of the guys said, "Shoot him, shoot him." Fortunately, he wasn't the guy with the gun, and he did not shoot me. I was shopping at an outdoor mall with my 4 or 5-year-old son. I felt someone grabbing my wallet from my back pocket. I instinctively swung around and hit the guy. He went down and dropped a knife. Afterwards, I noticed the front of my jacket had been slashed where he swung the knife at me when I hit him. Been through a lot of scary shit, but I think the most legit terrifying was someone breaking into our house from an adjoining attic crawlspace to rummage for pills in our medicine cabinet. My now ex was working swing shift, and my very pregnant self thought it was him coming home after night shift to shower. Thought it was weird he didn't kiss me, but figured he'd had a bad night at work and went to shower immediately. Imagine my surprise when he did come in and kiss me a while later, after I had a whole revelation moment that there had been a man in there earlier who was not my husband. It made it worse that I was pregnant at the time and extra emotional. For some reason, that one shook me more than other things that should have just been as scary probably. Passing out scuba diving, renal failure in a third world country, and being in Joe Arpaio's jail for a very brief stint, are all up there. I used to go for long walks in the woods at night, as the depression makes me value my personal safety less than a few minutes of peace. Then I got stalked by a mountain lion that had wandered into the city. The feeling of having an apex predator follow you is nearly indescribable, primal thing. It's so disconnected from any fear I've ever felt in my modern life, but at the same time, unmistakable for anything other than what it is. It's baked right into every cell of your body. You practically glow with terror. Externally, I was just walking home, but internally, I was absolutely and totally aware that there was a big cat behind me. It wanted to eat me, and I couldn't stop it if it decided to do this. I was working at a warehouse. There was a forklift that had an awkward load, like the guy sifted it a little bit. I went up to straighten a little bit off on it. Well, the guy was a complete goddamned idiot and backed through a doorway with the load quite a ways into the air, and it smacked into the top of the doorway at great speed. Again, the guy was a fucking idiot. He had gunned that forklift like he was racing the damn thing. Back to me. I am right in front of this load that is now coming at me at high speed. The load was literally like poorly stacked, heavy as lead metal. Time stopped. Two thoughts went through my head: try to stop it or get the hell out of there. I went with get the hell out of there, which was the right choice, because when that crap hit the floor, it left massive dents and gouges in the cement floor. There was no fucking way I could have stopped that. Too much weight and too much speed. Snowboarding accident. I was stupid and went with my brother up to the top of the mountain for a last run as a snowstorm was about to start. By the time we got to the top, it was getting bad. We had another genius idea and decided to go through the fun, off-site area. About 5 minutes down the mountain, the wind had started gusting heavily. My brother had an easier time as he's on skis and is heavier than me. A gust managed to knock me over, and I fell on my arm, breaking it. I was in too much pain to continue down in this weather, so we decided that my brother would continue and then alert the ski patrol about the situation. Sitting there on the mountain, off-piste in the middle of a heavy snowstorm with a broken arm all alone, just waiting, was the most uncomfortable I've ever been. I honestly don't remember how long it took them to find me again, but it was likely an hour or so. But seeing the lights of a snowmobile coming towards me was amazing. They got me down the mountain, no issues, and then I received a standard lecture from my mom about safety and shit. You know what I'm talking about. I was 17, was coming home from my girlfriend at the time's house around 3 or 4 in the morning. I live in an apartment and would regularly jump my backyard fence, climb up to the second floor, and come down the stairs to climb through my window on the first floor. I get to the fence, hear a car screeching its tires. I get to the top of the fence, and as I turn my back to land, I hear footsteps running towards where I am. I'm caught off guard because no one should be back here at this time. I land and turn around to see who it is. It's a neighbor who lives in the building, a 32-year-old gangster cholo, frequent drug user. I felt relief because we were on decent terms and he knew who I was growing up. But he has an Uzi in his hand. He half points it at me, shaking as he does so. I nearly shit myself, but he lowers it, realizing who I am, and say, "What's up?" He was obviously on drugs. Meth was his poison, and I could tell by the way he was talking. He asked me to hold the gun so he could take a piss, pushing it into my chest as he did so. I could feel him shaking from adrenaline or drugs. I look, and it's just cold, hard steel in the shape of a gun. It looked like death. I felt like I didn't have a choice. I was stuck for a second, but I managed to take a step back, raise my hands, and say, "Nah, bro, I can't." He says, "It's all good. Use her shirt to hold it, just real quick, so we can piss." I repeat, "Nah, I can't. Put it on the floor, and do what you gotta do, I'll keep watch." He proceeds to take a piss, turning my way every other second because his loaded gun is on the floor between us. I look the other way, try not to make him any more nervous. Look into the sky and hear a helicopter approaching. It's low, and its searchlight is scanning the area. I tell him, "Yo, I gotta go." He asks if I have keys to the backyard door. I nervously pulled them out and say, "Yeah, I do. Let's go through." I hurriedly walk or run to the door, open it for us. He lives on the first floor as well, and we go opposite ways, a huge relief. I have to jump through my window still. I can barely manage to get the screen off because I'm shaking so much. I manage to get in 10 seconds later, and I'm shaking, nervous from what just happened. I wash my face, change my clothes, get ready for bed, and smoke a few bowls of herb to calm down. I thought it was a good idea, so I put Adult Swim on and try to relax and drift to sleep. 20 minutes later, as I'm drifting off to sleep, a red laser is being pointed through my curtains. I nearly shit myself as my bed was visible and the dot seemed like it was shaky and searching. I was fucking terrified. My only thought was he went and got more high, thought about what happened, and decided I saw too much. I'm literally hugging my wall, standing on my bed, trying to avoid the laser beam. I thought it was dead. Then the light shuts off and flicks on and off a couple times, and I notice the angle isn't floor level, it's coming from the second floor. A neighbor girl I used to talk to had 2 younger sisters, and their window was across from mine, but on the second floor. They were shining a laser in my room. Most likely they saw me jumping into my room and decided it was a good fucking idea that night to shine a laser beam into my room. I was pissed and called her, sent her a few texts, blowing up about them shining a laser into my room that late at night. She understood without me having to explain, and they stopped immediately. But damn, the thoughts that were running through my head, I didn't know whether to laugh or to cry about the situation. Fell from 7.5 meters, ruptured lungs, broke 3 vertebrae, 2 teeth, and a jawbone. Been unconscious for about a minute, then started spitting loads of blood while lying on the back. Got anesthetized and put into a helicopter in about 15 minutes, but it sure as hell felt like an eternity. One would think that the most significant thing you feel is pain, but the shock just hits you so hard that although you scream in pain, on the inside, it's just this wild state of delirium, fear, and thinking, this is it. The drugged nightmares were also something else, since they had to give me 2 times the anesthetics and kept me in an induced coma for about 3 days. The fear in this situation doesn't only come from the first-person perspective, but also from the camp kids that were around to see me fall, and most importantly, my family nearly losing me. Shit's definitely made me rethink my life choices and the view on life in general. The most scariest thing that instantly comes into my mind is about my son, who was at that time 1 year old. He was lying or sleeping on the couch next to me, and his mother was sleeping too, at his feet. For some reason, I've had a bad feeling, and as I've touched his forehead, it was ice cold, even though he was sweating cold sweat. In the moment, I realized that this is going to be serious. He had an epileptic cramp, usually that from my brother who was heavy epilepsy, but at this time, it caught me off guard. All my logic and my brain in general were in panic mode. I grabbed him, holding him close to me, waking his mother up, and we both were in a state of fear and panic we've never experienced before. As he cramped up, I tried to call the ambulance, and for some reason between all the crying and stuttering, I could give them the proper details. After I hung up, he cramped so hard that he got all stiff looking, with big dead eyes to the ceiling, and in the next moment, his body relaxed. I mean, not relaxed, but became like jelly. He was unconscious, but we thought he had died at that moment, and there's no life signs whatsoever. Eyes closed, and I had a hard time holding him as his body was like running out of my arms. I really hope to never have such a moment again in my life. End of story, short version. Ambulance came, and I went with him to the hospital. Like mentioned before, he had a cramp, fell unconscious, and like this, we knew that he had, sounds ironic, a mild form of epilepsy. He's now 9 years old, perfectly fine, no more epilepsy. Last cramp was when he was like 5-ish, or at least no signs that can be detected by neurologists. I wished no one the feeling that we had that night. Me, my boyfriend, his sister, and her boyfriend were walking home from a bar in downtown Houston to her boyfriend's apartment after a long night. A car full of teenage to 20-ish-year-old kids offered us some bud and we rejected. They then continued to drive down the road catcalling me and boyfriend's sister. The boys were telling them to get out of here, and they eventually hopped out of their car and ran at us. Thankfully, nothing really came of it, but I was scared they would either 1, be armed, or 2, get really physical with us. I was taking a video after some time, and they literally parked in the middle of the road and charged us for just trying to get them to leave us alone. My mother had to spend a few months in an asylum due to her being maniacally depressed. There was a woman in the asylum who painted the inner selves of visitors. When she spotted me, she started crying and screaming and called me a monster and devil and so on. It was my first visit there, and I never talked to her before. After a few weeks, my dad and I went to the asylum to take my mother back home. One of the nurses approached me and handed me a painting from the lady who was so afraid of me. It literally was a black canvas with only 2 red eyes. Still creeps the hell out of me.